I'm here today with Ed Brady, who is the president of the Home Builders Institute, or HBI, the educational arm of NEHB, and Robert Dietz, the chief economist at NEHB, to talk about the ongoing skilled labor issue. Obviously, a lot of attention is currently being paid to materials pricing and supply chain issues, delays that are hindering production of housing. Those are important issues for sure. But I think all of us agree that once those issues are solved, and they will be solved, the industry is still going to be left with a kind of a crisis level skilled labor shortage, especially among some key trades in the field. So I wanted to sit down with Ed and with Rob and talk about that issue and bring up some data that we did and that NHB has done on that issue, just to kind of shine some light on the skilled labor issue. So welcome, gentlemen. I appreciate you being with me. What impact did the pandemic have on an already kind of stressed labor market for construction, for housing construction specifically? Ed, maybe you can start with that since you're the closest to it.
Yeah, well, I can start from a perspective. It's been much more challenging to get people on site, obviously, right? We shut down our 220 programs shut down overnight. A couple of military stayed on, but so we weren't doing any hands-on training for a number of weeks, I would say. The hands-on training was very challenging. The recruitment was very challenging because you couldn't onboard a student, for instance. And so what gets into kind of the what did you do? It forced us into an online blended learning process. So in fact, it gave us a bit of a pause at HBI, and I think some of the industry education, to update their technology, which we did. And so we were starting to train immediately online through our learning management system. And over the last 12 months, we've really been able to step that up and provide a very efficient way of online training, not leaving the hands-on training by the wayside. We still, as an industry, certainly as HBI, we believe that hands-on is critical to putting out the best student that you can. Repetitive, playing the piano, you got to practice. And so we'll continue to emphasize the hands-on. But it has been a real challenge over the last 12 months, getting new people interested.
Did it kind of surprise you that it was a challenge to recruit people even when they were losing jobs and there were jobs available in our industry?
Yeah, I would say there was a huge interest, but we couldn't bring them online because we had no platform. We had no locations that they could come and train. And so we in fact recruited. We have 16 plus thousand users on our LMS today. In March of last year, we might have had 2,000. So you can see the increase. Now we're marketing it much better. But again, Rob will say it's the skilled labor force that we're challenged with. And there are a lot of people out there, displaced workers, but they have no skill in our industry. And so bringing them on board has been challenging.
I got you. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And so, Rob, I want to kind of circle back to the impact that you saw in terms of the pandemic. How many jobs were lost or delayed, if you will, furloughed or not able to go? Tell me kind of how the impact of the pandemic that you saw on labor.
Yeah, the impact in the construction industry was kind of interesting and revealing of the impacts of the pandemic. So we saw both residential and non-residential construction lose tens of thousands of jobs in the March and April data. The difference was that in the residential construction industry over the last 12 months, we've got a gain on a net basis of about 88,000 workers. In fact, we're one of the few sectors that was larger at the end of 2020 than it was at the start of 2020, which was a complete vindication and proof of the ongoing skilled labor shortage. That in an environment where it was hard to bring people online, the challenges that Ed's indicating, or the challenges at an individual work site, we still added workers. In contrast, the non-residential construction industry, which may take about 4 years to recover to its level of economic output, absent some large infrastructure bill, still remains down in terms of total jobs. And then the conversation you were having before about, we had elevated unemployment. The unemployment rate peaked above 15%. It was probably closer to 18 or 19% if we measured it correctly, because there was a lot of unusual data in 2020. But there's a concept in economics called the spatial mismatch. Think about the sectors and where they're located, where those job losses occurred. Restaurants, hospitality, travel, tourism. It's a lot of, kind of large metro, higher density type neighborhoods. Well, how do you get workers who lost their jobs in Manhattan and downtown San Francisco to go build homes in Idaho and Utah? That doesn't happen overnight. And so the combination of, as Ed indicated, in terms of the training, which is a multi-year process that requires resources and expertise like HBI has, and then, the geographic challenge, bringing people out. And there's the chicken and egg problem, right? Someone can't move to an area where housing is being built until the housing is being built. And so there's a lot of different challenges in terms of trying to bring people into residential construction. I think we did add workers when you saw an elevated unemployment rate, but the fact that we didn't add more, and we have an ongoing shortage of, in any given month, maybe about 300,000 workers, is an indication of the long-term challenge here.
Right. Thank you. And so is it fair to say, and even coming farther back in time, is it fair to say that the Great Recession and the simple lack of work available? I mean, we dipped, below 1 million units. We had a slow recovery. I think people looked at 2019 and 2020 certainly as the emergence of the housing industry finally from the Great Recession, and of course the pandemic hit, and it kind of, that all went by the wayside for a certain extent of time. But is it fair to say the Great Recession really saw, kind of put the labor issue into sharper relief, and the losses that we're seeing now, or the gap that we're seeing now, is somewhat a result of that?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, if you look at the labor data for the residential construction industry, we're talking remodeling, apartment building, single family construction, and land development added together. The workforce at its peak during the building boom, say in 2006, 3.5 million workers. A few years later, it dropped down to 2 million. So we lost 1.5 million out of 3.5 million. Since that time, over essentially the decade after the Great Recession's impacts ended, we added about 1 million workers. So we're still short 500,000 from that peak total. And that, again, another sort of chicken and egg problem, which is starts have remained low. And some of that is due to a lack of available labor in some markets to be able to build that housing.
Right. Ed, from your perspective, I'm sure that data coincides with what you saw and the pressure on the industry to kind of fill that 1.5 million gap from the Great Recession to now. What have you been, I know you've been working hard, so this is not a good indictment of that, but what have you been doing at HBI, and just what other things you've seen around the country in terms of trying to replenish that labor pool, and what's been successful and what's been kind of hindering you from doing that?
Yeah, well, it's Rich, as NHB chairman, I went around the country and preached about advocating for ourselves, right? And the home builders industry and the construction industry has to advocate for themselves. So what we're doing is we're looking for resources. It takes money to train. And so with the CARES Act and with some of the stimulus, there is new money out there for displaced workers, for unemployed workers to retrain. So number one, we're going out looking for that kind of money. We've got CDBG money down in Houston. There's other opportunities, government funded. So it's short term, quite frankly, and it's not as consistent and pretty cumbersome with some of the regulations on how to do that. So what we very successful this year, we implemented a grant that took applications for schools to get our curriculum back into their system, and we had over 130 applications. So there is a huge interest. There is a perception change, I believe, at the secondary school level, that this is a good career path. It's a slow burn. It's not immediate, but to change the teachers, to change the administrators, to change the legislators, to change parents and students' minds that this is a good career path is actually taking place. And so we, with the help of our funders, National Housing Endowment, Truist Bank came in, Home Depot Foundation, we were able to grant over 80, we're about to announce over 80 new school districts with over 100 schools that will bring our curriculum into their system. So that's a success story. We've got thousands of schools, and we're chipping away at it. And we're doing that, frankly, through networking, through local home builders associations, through the industry, through publications like you that are promoting what we're doing, so that we can get the message out.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And it kind of leads into the next question, which is, the data that we collected from home builders in March of 2020 and March of 2021 regarding the labor issue and where they thought it was going to be, how it was going to be, the pool was going to be replenished, who was going to lead that, what programs were going to be relied upon. They almost overwhelmingly said that it's going to be high school and adult vocational programs. So Ed, as you chip away at this, as you try to get more schools to adopt this curriculum and they said change minds and get it back into high schools, what's the current state of that infrastructure? Is it obviously some programs were still going on and you have your own programs and things like that, but from a strictly secondary school, high school, adult vocation, where does that infrastructure sit right now?
Well, I do think I toured even pre-COVID. I toured high schools that shop class was mothballed. The building was still there. The shop room was still there with equipment in it, ready to go. Flip the lights on and you could go. So there is still some of those that are coming back. That the old schools have those. Some of the new schools are putting an emphasis on CTE, and so there are new infrastructure buildings. We are working the community college system in adult learning, so I think there's some opportunities there with government funds. How the community colleges are funded. I think this administration wants to put more money into community colleges. I would say we have to be a little careful there because community colleges have a mission to get 2-year degrees, and they do have adult learning, but we need immediacy. We need somebody to come in and adult learn, do a 10, 12-week course and get onto the job site. So I think the infrastructure is there, but I would love to hear Rob again because I use it all the time. As you enter a new student into the industry, it may take 3 new students to do the work of one journeyman, one carpenter that's been there for 35 years. And so production is going to go down before it goes up, even with a new influx. And so, it's a real challenge to get the number of students to populate the next generation so that we have the same productivity, not even gaining on the productivity.
Right. Great point. And so Rob, what's your take on that?
Yeah, one of the challenges I think has been well studied. We've done it. There's a McKinsey Institute study that indicates that productivity in the industry has been flat for the last 20 years. Where if you look at the overall economy, productivity per worker is up about 30%, and a lot of that is technology investment, and it's demographics is exactly what Ed said, which is you bring new people in. By definition, not saying we can't bring new people in, but new people are going to be less productive than that person that's got decades of experience. So it's a long-term type challenge, but ultimately through investment in both labor and in capital by changing production techniques, productivity will go up, and when productivity goes up, wages go up. So it becomes a virtuous cycle, and higher wages will then attract additional workers. I do think we've got a challenge in terms of the demographics, particularly when you look at the share of graduating high school students that go to 4-year universities. And I think, economists like to rely on data, but I do think we're going to have a broader conversation over the next, say, 4 to 5 years about the value of increasingly sending people to school with $100,000 or $200,000 in student loans. And particularly if you look at the graduation rate out of 4-year institutions, it's about 60% of students graduate over a 5-year period from a 4-year institution, when there are hundreds of thousands of jobs, not just in construction, but manufacturing and transportation as well. So there's going to be disruptive forces in terms of maybe providing additional designations or training credentials that will allow people to get jobs in demand right now, and construction's got to be part of that conversation.
And do you feel like that, again, as builders indicated in the research that we did with housing with home innovation research labs, that's where it's going to be led is the vocational training, whether it's at a school or through HPI or through other programs. That's how we're going to refill this pool. Or do you look at it like, yeah, that's kind of be the main thing because that infrastructure is there and that's what we know and that's where we're going. But are there other? Is it going to be kind of more of a collective of different things that are going to come into play?
There are multiple challenges facing the industry, whether it's lack of lots or construction techniques and materials. We have to advance the ball in all directions at once, to kind of mix metaphors. But labor is our long-term challenge. And if we're thinking about different kinds of construction techniques, these are kind of relatively small. In fact, if you look at like panelized and modular construction right now, it's only 3% of single family starts. It was 7 or 8% 2 decades ago. So there's some room for growth, and that will offer in some markets some productivity gains. But at the end of the day, home building is jobs. And it takes about 3 workers to build a single family home if you add up their labor time over a year. And there's very little substitute for those workers. And so it does represent a limitation on how much housing supply we can add in a market that desperately needs more single family homes. And we're short probably about 3 million single family units right now in the marketplace.
Right. Ed, what's your take on that? I imagine it's somewhat similar, but how do you, when you look at technologies, and I'm going to use that term a little loosely because, pre-cut, panelized, modular, they've been around for a long time. I mean, we all know that. We've all seen, like you said, Rob, kind of the ebb and flow of its use in terms of single family housing production. But when you look at your training curriculum and you look at kind of the opportunity potentially there for some of those other construction techniques, how do you see that as a factor and build it into your curriculum? Or do you say, look, it's got to become a little bit more of a critical mass before we really kind of start training people on it?
Well, we're constantly updating our curriculum. So, if you use PEX instead of copper, I mean, we're trying to teach what people are using, right? And so innovation, technology is obviously increasing. I wouldn't say we're state of the art as an industry. We have to move a little more forward. But I use an example. When I used to frame, I put 4x8 sheets on the wall. Now you can use 4x9 sheets. So you go with a box seal, you got better seal, so industry's slowly creeping along that innovative path. But I agree with Rob, and I laugh when I look at some of the modulars filming, and there's good reason for modular. But if you look at it, the crane's there, and there's still 12 or 15 women sitting there, ready to assemble it and put it together. The same in a factory. Yes, there's automation, but you still need those skilled labor to know what they're doing and to press the right buttons and make sure that the right cuts are done. So I'm with Rob in this. I think I'll keep my day job for a while because I don't think innovation and technology is going to make up the labor shortage in the short term. It was interesting in your survey that attracting net workers was increased pay and benefits. I think we as an industry have to have that discussion. Because I have people that are being trained in carpentry, go on the job making $25, $28 an hour, good hourly wage, but they don't necessarily have the benefits some other industries offer. So that's an innovative process that the industry has to take place. It may not seem all that innovative, but I do think that we're going to have to go there.
Yeah, innovation doesn't always mean technology. It can mean diversity too. We've only got 3% of the people swinging hammers are women right now. So there's ways to recruit communities that have not traditionally participated in construction.
We teach a very diverse, at-risk, underserved population. 60% of our students are African American, a number of Hispanics, and women. Rob is absolutely right. We're trying to recruit more and more women into the industry. You don't have to just go into sales and marketing as a woman today. You can get on the job site, and the trades are for you as well.
And I want to circle back a little bit to something you said, Ed, about the immigration issue. And it's interesting to kind of see, again, back to the Great Recession and even during the pandemic, of immigration labor, at least as a percentage of labor for housing construction, going down. Not as many immigrants, non-native folks in the industry at the skilled labor level. what kind of things do you think need to change to encourage more of that, to get more of that? What kind of policies do you see that would help that kind of replenish that aspect of it?
Well, I'm not necessarily expert on legislation, but I think, when you talk about visas, you talk about skilled labor, you're always talking technology. And quite frankly, we need some skilled labor visas for our industry, for the trades. And so we don't have that. So I think that we should be advocating for opening up some opportunities for skilled labor to come in a legal way.
We see in the data exactly what you're saying, which is that the share of the immigrant workforce in the construction industry has fallen from about 30% to about 26% in recent years. But from a policy perspective, think how upside down our policies are when you look at education policy and immigration policy together. Immigration policy has been a focus on bringing in highly trained, highly skilled technology people. But on the education side, we're trying to focus people on going to four-year colleges and grad schools to go into highly trained, highly skilled technological sectors. You're pushing from both ends here, and the result is you've left from the overall economy, construction, manufacturing, transportation, energy, relatively neglected. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It needs some rationalization, and it's probably not a big surprise that we've developed a skilled labor shortage in construction over the last 2 decades as a result.
Right. Okay, great. Guys, this has been terrific. Is there anything else, and I'll start with you, Rob, and then we'll go to Ed. Anything else that you'd like to tell builders about this issue, about managing labor shortages or finding skilled labor, that things that you've learned from other builders, or just advice that you give them?
I think this remains a challenge for the industry for at least next 5 to 10 years. And because of the aggregate numbers that we track, we last year built 1 million single family homes. We need to be building at least 1.2 million single family homes a year. The millennials are right in their peak home buying years, and we have a shortage of about 3.5 million homes. All of that put together means we have a long runway for growth, 5 to 10 years of 1 million plus single family homes a year. And we're going to need a lot more workers to build them.
I go back to your survey, 44% said high school vocational training. And I think we have to go and promote that. We have to promote that at the high school level. We have to bring it back in. It's going to take a generation. It's going to take years to improve this, to repopulate the aging population. So I would say to builders that nobody's going to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves, and we have to do it at the grassroots level. We have to do it at that high school level. And then your other graph that shows 74% recruit the next generation, that's us. We have to recruit that next generation. So I want to cheerlead a little bit to encourage builders and the subcontractors out there to continue to push their educational system at the community college, at the secondary level, and frankly, even at the elementary and middle school level, because we're in the process of designing a curriculum that will introduce the trades at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level. And educators tell us that's hugely important, because the time they get to 9th grade, they already have in their mind they want to do something. And so if we don't introduce that, summer camps, anything that gets field trips, anything that gets the juices flowing, that they can go home and talk to their parents and get enthusiastic about it. There's a lot of high school students out there that don't want to take the 4-year path, but they don't know another path to take. So that's my soapbox, Rich. I continue to advocate we're the only ones that are going to help ourselves.
If you're interested in seeing the full range of data that we collected from our surveys among builders with the Home Innovation Research Labs, as well as the data that we used from NAHB and other sources, please go to probuilder.com and check it out. We look forward to your comments. And if you've got any ideas or any solutions that you have in your market or your business for the skilled labor issue, please share it with us. You can email me at rbinsaka@sgcmail.com. Or give me a call. My number is in the masthead of every issue. Thanks again for watching, and have a great rest of your day.